Hi there, Steve Kaufman here. And this is, I have two channels here at YouTube. I have the Lingo-Steve channel where I talk about language learning. And then some while ago, I started this thing which I called Steve's Cafe, where I was going to ramble about political subjects in order to keep that separate from my language channel. And then I didn't want to maintain it because it's a lot of work for me, I have lots of things that I'm doing, and to constantly go back and look to see if there were any comments and answer the comments and stuff. So I'm not going to answer the comments on this channel, but I was quite surprised to see the amount of interest there was in the video that I did about Donald Trump and literacy. So I thought I would follow up with another video now about literacy and why literacy matters. And I'm going to delve a little bit into politics. Some of the comments that I received on the sort of Donald Trump literacy video were along the lines of, literacy doesn't make you smart just because you have big words. So you read a lot of other people's opinions, but that doesn't mean that you have valuable opinions. Fine. It's not about reading opinions. In order to have an informed, valuable opinion, it helps to know something. And generally speaking, although not always, the more we know, and I'm not talking about other people's opinions, I'm talking about facts. The more facts, because facts exist, the truth exists. There are real facts, and then there are false facts. And in order to be able to distinguish the false from the real, we actually have to have access to a lot of information. And the best way, the fastest way to acquire that is through reading, not watching the evening news. So in order to, and I see these teachers who want to teach critical thinking. There are a number of articles that show that the best way to improve your critical thinking is to have a lot of information, real facts, and that requires reading. So reading is important in order to be able to marshal information, real information, to justify whatever point of view you have. Now, to a large extent, our positions are more emotional than based on fact, but in order to justify these positions, or in order to be able to even debate other people's positions, you have to have facts. And to get at those facts, you need to read a lot, because things aren't that simple. For example, when Donald Trump says that NAFTA is the worst trade deal ever negotiated, that probably appeals to a lot of people. But in order to evaluate whether that is in fact a true statement, or at least a worthwhile opinion to have, you need to read about what is in NAFTA, what have been the results of NAFTA, what has been the impact of NAFTA on the American economy. And so you have to be able to read. And those people who do read generally come to the conclusion that NAFTA hasn't had such a big impact. That's only one example. Another example, let's say, first of all, before we get into the politics, the fact of the matter is that you are far more likely to do well academically and eventually professionally if you can read well. And that's been demonstrated, that even more than the number of years in school, it's people's ability to read that determines their success. Not for everyone. It's a bit like smoking. If you stop smoking, that doesn't mean that you're automatically going to live to the age of 110. Nor is it true that everybody who smokes is going to drop dead at the age of 50. But it's just the likelihood. The likelihood statistically is that you will live longer if you don't smoke, and that you'll be healthier if you don't smoke. Not everyone, but a statistically significant number of people will benefit from not smoking. The same is true of reading. The better you read, and I'm not just talking about being able to read an article, I'm talking about being able to read a lot and be able to read fast. And when the statistics show that 75% of university students in the United States, and it might be true elsewhere, have trouble reading and understanding complex texts, that's a real problem. And it doesn't matter what you do. If you're in a technical field, you still have to read. And the fastest way to acquire information is not watching videos on YouTube, it's reading. Now, that doesn't apply to everything. And I have worked with people. I have worked with, when I was involved in a sawmill, very capable sawmill manager who had worked around machines since the age of 15. And he was, with regard to machines, I might read better than he does, but when it comes to machines and managing the mill, he was far better than I would be. So it's not like every situation you have to be well read. However, when he goes to hire an electrician, that electrician has to read a lot in order to be up on all of the latest technology that's in the sawmill. So even for technical issues, you need to be able to read well. Now, so reading is good for you. Reading is good for you professionally and also personally. You can access so much more information. It's like one of the comments on my Trump and literacy video was, well, what have you ever done? You know, how successful have you ever made? You haven't made as much money as Trump. Well, I didn't start off with as much money as Trump, and I certainly haven't made as much money as Trump, but I derived tremendous satisfaction and enjoyment from my reading. My reading has led me into learning many, many languages, because the bigger your vocabulary in your own language, the bigger your vocabulary will be in other languages. So I have derived tremendous personal satisfaction from literacy. That doesn't mean that everyone has to do what I do, but the fact that I'm not a multimillionaire like Trump doesn't mean that I have a less successful life. All right? So just to deal with that issue. Now, getting back to the importance for a president to be very literate. For example, here we have the visit of Shinzo Abe, Japanese Prime Minister. So we see the pictures of Trump shaking his hand and playing golf with him and so forth and so on. I wonder how well prepared Trump was for his meeting with Shinzo Abe. Because after all, during the election campaign, Trump had basically he said all the world is ripping the US off, but the biggest culprits in ripping off the US were China, Japan, and Mexico. So, first of all, we see Trump has now abandoned his attempt to kind of do a deal with Taiwan. He's accepted the Chinese position that there is only one China. So he's backed down vis-a-vis China. And here we have this other culprit that's ripping off the US. Japan, their prime minister arrives. Who do you think is better prepared, Donald Trump or Shinzo Abe? I say that because I know from my experience, having worked for the government, whenever I was with ministers, they had briefing books this big that they went through, they read, they discussed with their advisors, but they read a lot. They read a lot. Now, I am sure that there are people in the State Department and in the Department of Commerce who prepared a bunch of material for Donald Trump for these discussions, because trade relations between Japan and the US has been an ongoing sore point between those two countries ever since I was at the Canadian Embassy in Tokyo in the early 1970s. So here we have two sides arrive. So I decided to read, because I read Japanese, so I decided to read the Mainichi Shimbun in Japanese. And the overwhelming impression from the Japanese side was, wow, we expected some real tough talk, and that was not the case. Everything was sweetness and light. The Japanese Trade Ministry and Foreign Ministry did a great job of preparing us. These are business people that accompanied Shinzo Abe. We had good meetings with Vice President Pence, because he's very pleased that the Japanese, I can't remember which company, has invested in plants in Indiana, and everything was sweetness and light. So where is this, the Japanese have been ripping us off? I really wonder whether Trump, in fact, has the ability to plow through briefing material in order to understand the complexities of the trading and investment relationship with Japan, so that he can negotiate perhaps better conditions for, or some kind of new wrinkle in that trade relationship that might benefit the US. How is he going to get those concessions out of the Japanese if he doesn't understand the complexity of the relationship? So I say that in all spheres of life, reading, high literacy doesn't make you more intelligent. By no means. You can be very stupid and read a lot. However, I would say that even if you are less intelligent, reading helps you. You can mask it. The more words you have, the more accurately you can express your thoughts. It doesn't mean you're always going to have better opinions, but you can defend them better. You can understand better what other people are saying. You can access more information. You can be better prepared, okay? Not everybody will be right because they read well, but statistically, they'll have a better chance at it. So literacy matters, and I think that, just to continue a bit here, this whole thing about this education minister in the United States, I don't understand the issues. Everybody, the progressives are very upset that they appointed this lady. I have no idea. I do know, though, that whatever they do, and it might be true in Canada, in the education system, whatever has been the norm so far isn't working very well, because there's 20-30% of the population who don't read very well at all, and there's only like 20% at the top who read very well. And if somehow we were able to get people to read better, that would, I think, have a major impact on reducing inequality, improving people's incomes, improving the range of intellectual enjoyment that people can participate in. So I believe this very strongly. The number one issue in education is literacy. And just to continue, there's only one definition, in my view, of literacy, and that is the ability to read, and to read well. There aren't different kinds of literacy. There aren't, computer literacy or emotional literacy and all this other stuff that teachers get into, all these sort of progressive educators. Forget it. Literacy is the ability to read. Now, there might be different forms of intelligence. Certainly, the mill manager that I referred to earlier is much more intelligent than I am when it comes to machines. And there are different kinds of intelligence, and these intelligence or capabilities we develop by being exposed to and working at different things in our lives. However, all things considered, the best way to give people a head start in life is to make sure that they leave school very, very literate. And so far, that is not happening in North American education, and that is the biggest issue in education, not whether Kate DeVos is Minister of Education or whatever it's called in the US. So, thanks for listening. Bye for now.